Hey everyone, this is MusicTechHelpGuy. In this video, I want to show you how you can use strings more expressively in your electronic and hip-hop beats. Particularly, I want to show you how to use the different articulation sets within the Studio Strings plugin in Logic Pro 10. Now, I did do a video on using articulation sets, a dedicated video to it a while back, but that was pretty much just an example of how to use it, not an actual like musical example. And this is also, again, aimed more at hip hop and electronic beats, not for orchestral scoring or movie scoring or anything like that. So if you're going to incorporate strings into modern music, it's important to understand that strings are not just one directional. You don't just have to use their legato or sustained playing style. Because usually what happens when I see hip hop and electronic beats using strings as a main element of the beat, you're typically just using that sound. And it's usually just one track or one instrument with a string patch pulled up, and all of the strings are grouped onto that track. Everything's playing sustained style with long notes. But strings are much more diverse than that. They have a lot more expressiveness in them and some of their playing techniques that you can bring out using articulation sets in Logic. So let me show you what I have here. I've got just a basic beat here with a synthesizer on it. And if it sounds kind of dreamy sounding, I intend for it to be that way. And then I have full strings. I have violins 1 and 2, violas, cello, and basses, just like the full complement of strings in a string orchestra. And then everything together. Now, if you wanted all of those strings played in that sort of long note sustained style, fine, you know, this would work out just fine as is. But in my second violin and my violas, I've got these little bum 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 things going on. And really, the main melody is between the first violins and the cello, really with the cello being accented more than the other strings. And then the bass is just kind of chugging along with quarter notes. But with the bass, I want it to be more like boom, boom, boom. So there's a bunch of different styles that we can incorporate into these to make the strings more realistic and more expressive, you know, not for it to all just sound like a wash of sound. So let's start with the violins and the violas. Now, when you choose a Studio Strings patch, what you can do is go over to your track inspector here and go down to where it says Articulation Set. Normally, this will just be blank. Now, I chose second violin, so what I'm going to do under my articulation set is choose Studio Strings and then Studio Violins. So the violin 1 and 2 articulation sets are the same. They're just two different sets of samples. Studio Violas has its own set. The basses and the cellos all have their own set, in addition to the different ensembles. So I'm going to choose Studio Violins for the articulation set for this one. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing for all the other tracks. So violin 1, I'll use Studio Violins. Violas, I'll use Studio Violas. Cello, choose Studio Cellos. And then basses, Studio Double Basses. Okay, so I've chosen the articulation sets for each of those. Now what that allows me to do is you just solo both my violas and my violin, open these up. What that allows me to do is drag over notes in the piano roll editor and change their articulation right here. Now, the reason why it's grayed out right now is because I have two of them selected. But if I just select first violin here, and I drag over these notes, I can change the articulation to something else. So we have sustain, staccato, spiccato, different falls and scoops, different accents and crescendos. For violin 2 and viola, I'm going to choose pizzicato, which is where they pluck the string rather than bowing the string. So I'm going to select all of the notes in there, and I'm going to make them pizzicato. But notice when you have two different articulation sets selected, you get like a little asterisk. You can reset that just by going up to the dash and then going back to the articulation set. Okay, so now all of the notes here are all pizzicato. But at the end, there's these long notes. I don't necessarily want these long notes to be pizzicato. Maybe I want those to be long tones. Well, all you have to do is drag over these, go to articulation, and set these back to the sustain articulation. Or if I wanted them to be played more forcefully, I could change this to accented sustain. Or maybe just the last note accented. So maybe these ones, I'll change these back to regular sustain. So I'm going to do the same for the violas, since the viola part is very similar. So all these short notes here will all be pizzicato. These will stay, let me just turn off my MIDI out. These will stay sustained, and my last note will be accented sustain. Cool, and now viola and violin 2. Let's go up to the lead violin here. Now, I think there's a lot of long notes here, but I think what I'm going to do is, for these long notes and these long notes, I'm going to make this tremolo. So tremolo is when you bow really fast. Now, all of these little quarter note ideas here, I'm going to make these staccato. That means played short. I'll make these all tremolo as well. And then like the violas and second violins, that very last note, I'm going to make that accented sustain. So let me jump down to the cello now. The cello is very similar to the first violin, but I don't want the tremolo. Remember I said the cello is almost sort of like the main idea here. So I'm going to make all of the long notes, I'm going to keep those sustain. I'm going to make the short notes staccato, just like I did with the lead violins. So I'll make all these staccato. And then the very last note will be accented sustain. I mean, doesn't that sound so much better than before? It seems so much more intentional. It seems so much more like a real player is playing the cello rather than this just being a MIDI patch with just sustained notes. Basses. Now, I think I'm going to want a lot of this to be pizzicato. But there's another one called spiccato. Spiccato is almost like it's like pizzicato, but it's like a really short bow. But it doesn't sound so great at louder velocities, and I really want my bass to kind of come through. Let's try pizzicato for this. And then the last three are going to be sustain, and just like the other instruments, the very last note's going to be accented sustain. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to duplicate this up an octave just to reinforce the bass a bit. I think this note can go down, though, instead of up. The lowest note on upright bass is E0 right here. So that low note can still get down there. Okay, so let's listen to just the strings now. This should sound like a much more believable string ensemble. And let's see what all this sounds like together with the beat back in. There's some other things we could do as well, in particular these spots where it goes bum, 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 the little staccato spots. If we wanted to, I could come in here and just really ramp up the automation on those points to bring out the sort of staccato element there. Or I could even dub in some additional strings on another track, really just hitting those bum, bum, bum points. But I think you get the idea, you know, using different articulations will make the string orchestra sound more realistic, and therefore will give the song more expression. All right, there you go. That's how you can use different articulation sets to make studio strings in Logic Pro 10 sound even more realistic. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. Thanks for the support, and thanks for watching.